Welcome to NPO Showcase. I'm Sister Barbara Hanson, the Community Outreach Coordinator here at the Community Media Center. NPO Showcase provides visibility to the many nonprofit and governmental organizations in the greater Grand Rapids community, organizations that improve the quality of life in our city and throughout our community. My guest on this first segment of NPO Showcase is Michael Miller. He is the Director of Acton Media. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Sister. It's good to be here.
And we're going to be talking about Poverty Cure today. So tell me what it is and why that campaign is different than all the other poverty campaigns we have.
Well, Poverty Cure is an international network of organizations that have come together to promote enterprise solutions to poverty, entrepreneurial solutions to poverty in the developing world, rooted in an understanding of the person that's creative with a lot of capacity. So I think one of the things that makes us maybe different is that we're trying to bring together a couple of things. Everyone, I think, has a heart for the poor, but sometimes we don't have a mind for the poor. Mm-hmm. And so what Poverty Cure is trying to do is challenge some of the assumptions that we have about the way we think about poverty, the way we think about poor people, and try to connect these good intentions to sound economics and to things that actually work. And what we find, and I've traveled a lot. I've had the blessing to be able to travel and interview probably over 100 people for this project. And one thing we hear is that what the poor need is not more charity or more aid, as much as they need the opportunity to create wealth and prosperity for their families and their communities. And so I think that we have used a model of aid and charity, which is necessary in extreme situations. We've taken that model and we've made that into a model for development. And the problem is that's not how you get out of poverty. So I think one of the ways we're different is that everybody says, how do we get out of poverty? And we're trying to change the terms of the debate to say, how do we create wealth and prosperity in these communities so that people can take care of their families and themselves and not be dependent on charity? So there's a movement towards partnership instead of merely just us trying to maybe solve all the problems.
I know you just came back from a trip to Haiti, so that ought to be a laboratory in what you're trying to see. What did you find there?
Well, it's interesting that you use that word. I'll maybe answer this in two ways. First of all, it was obviously a powerful experience. A couple things that stood out. One is the beauty of Haiti and the energy of the people.
Oh, the energy of the people.
The terrible earthquake that so many people suffered. There's this amazing energy to rebuild, even in very difficult situations. The other thing that was interesting is they called Haiti over and over again. People would say, Haiti is the republic of NGOs. And they say there's about 12,000 NGOs working in Haiti. And there's this sense there that you could hear from lots of different people. We interviewed farmers, small business people, watched some business training, visited a project from a man who used to have an orphanage but now has hired women to sell things and build artisanal types of crafts that they're now selling in the United States. And one of the things that stood out was this sense that everywhere you look, somebody else is trying to develop Haiti. And one of the things that came, I think, across very strongly was that here was a perfect example where there are good intentions that have actually made things worse. Let me give you a couple of examples. In a big scale example, President Clinton, I think, even talked about this a while back. The United States, what we do is we protect our agriculture, just like the European Union. And protecting our agriculture, we say we're going to protect the small farmer. We don't always protect the small farmer, but that's what we say we're going to do. And then in protecting our agriculture, we also subsidize our agriculture. Then we take the extra and we send the surplus over to developing countries as foreign aid to help them. But what happens is it distorts their local markets.
Yes.
So Haiti used to be close to self-sufficient in rice and other food production. Now it's dependent upon our aid. And so there's an example of good intentions, trying to help, actually having bad outcomes because the heart and the mind for the poor weren't connected. Another thing I learned in Haiti, which was very surprising, is that, I don't have the official data on this, but on several of the people I talked to, gave me the same number. And they said about 80% of all the orphans in Haiti actually have parents, or at least one living parent, who they know and they see them. So what the problem is that we've actually created incentives for economic relinquishment of children. One of the people I talked to, he and his wife were going to adopt a child. And so they went down, and at the orphanage, the man said, would you like to meet the child's mother? Now, of course, in an American situation, we'd think, oh, is she willing to meet us? And how sad it must be for her to give up her child, and what's going to happen? So they were like, is this all right? I mean, is she okay with that? Oh, yes, indeed, she's fine with that, And it's like, does she know the child? Like, oh, yes, she comes every week to see the child. Oh, my goodness. All right, and to bring presents and other things like that. So the man and his wife met with this woman and asked, well, why are you giving up your child for adoption? And it wasn't because she didn't love her child. It was because she thought this was going to be a way for her, or for the child, to have a better life. And so here's an example where, for example, we look at the plight of children in the developing world and we think, I want to help the children. But sometimes in our helping the children and going around the parents, we actually create incentives for economic relinquishment. And so whether it's a big scale or a small scale, one of the things that stood out so strongly in Haiti is that the way people get out of poverty is not necessarily by our doing great things for them. Instead, it's by us partnering together and helping them to create, and they themselves creating the conditions so they can create wealth and prosperity for themselves and their families. And then they can be food sufficient, and they won't have the need for economic relinquishment. And so those are some of the things that stood out to me.
Oh, my. When I saw that you had been to Haiti, I thought it would have to be a place where you could test the principles that you're advocating for. How did Poverty Cure get started? I mean, whose vision is this?
Well, let me say one thing first, because about the laboratory, the experiment. One of the themes of Poverty Cure is that the developing world is not an experiment or a laboratory for those of us in the developed world who are interested in poverty. And I think this has been really a problem. If you look at the development strategies over the last 60 years, it's always kind of big plans, big projects. How are we going to create infrastructure? How are we going to create education? How are we going to create these things? And we're always asking, how are we going to end poverty? Well, how was poverty ended in Europe and the United States and Japan? It wasn't ended in big plans with foreign nations coming in or lots of charity. It was ended when people were given space to exercise their entrepreneurial gifts. And that's the same here in Grand Rapids as it is in Haiti or Rwanda or Ghana or Kenya or Argentina or the Dominican Republic. And sometimes I think what happens is we unintentionally, I think it's a challenge for everyone, we unintentionally sometimes look at the poor as somehow as different species from us. And we try to maybe protect the poor from competition or help the poor or look at them as a need, but we don't see their capacity. And so I think that this idea of it not being an experiment and looking at the poor as partners instead of as a need or someone to help. One of the friends of mine, he always says, we give aid to Africa, but we don't do business with Africa. Right? And I think this idea of partnering, so that's one of the other parts of the difference. How did it start? Well, in looking at the situation in the developing world, there's really, I would say, a large kind of paradigm where you have development aid agencies that are giving aid and projects like we talked about. You have governments, and the governments don't have private property and rule of law and free association. And all of the discussion about poverty is centered around how can we do something for the poor and how do we alleviate poverty. But as my colleagues and I got together and we thought about it and talked and read great scholars on these things, the question is, wait a minute, that's not the question. The question is not how do we end poverty. The question is how do we create wealth and prosperity in those individual communities. And so the vision of Poverty Cure really is to promote a new way of thinking. And so right now we have about 150 partners from all over the world who join this vision. And we have people here in Grand Rapids. We have the Partners Worldwide, who does business training throughout the developing world. We have people who promote microfinance, people who help orphans. One of our partners, they help orphans, and they also help to rescue women from human trafficking. And what they began to find is that they had created almost a cycle of orphans, where orphans would then become, would have orphans, and then you have this cycle. And they realized, well, we need to rethink this. And so they began to apply this enterprise entrepreneurial model to it and to create independence. And this really has an empowering impact on the way people experience their lives. Just like you and I, if we were in this difficult situation, we would want help, but we wouldn't want somebody to take it over for us. We'd want them to empower us. And so Poverty Cure, that vision is to really work as partners.
Is Grand Rapids the main headquarters?
Well, Poverty Cure is an initiative of the Acton Institute, where I work.
Okay.
But it's a network of partners, and so the Acton Institute is the main initiative behind it. Right. But we've worked with partners worldwide, as I said, from the beginning in Grand Rapids. We were traveling with them in Haiti. We have interviewed people from all over the world, and so we have a lot of people who are supporting this idea, because it's started by the Acton Institute, but it's not just our initiative. We wanted to really engage and partner and learn from people. And so, we have lots of feedback and interaction and commentary from a lot of people who've helped shape this message so that we can really change the way we think about the poor and think about poverty.
When I use laboratory, I use it in the sense that you would go there and see a lot of data.
Right,
not
sister,
so
yes.
much. Yeah, not so
Right.
much. But I understand what you're saying.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it
thank
certainly
you.
is the major. I mean, it is the way we tend to look at things, and it is self-defeating, and at least for the people who are thinking we think we're helping. Give me a success story about competition, because I think a lot of people would say, well, competition must hurt the people, and you're saying it's the opposite. So can you give me an example?
Well, I think there are lots of examples. Let me talk about a couple things.
We don't have a lot of time. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, one thing is, when you're in the developing world, one thing you hear over and over again is, please don't give us any more aid. Let us compete. And I've asked a lot of people, do you think competition helps the poor? And they say yes. I've talked to poor Haitian farmers who say, we need a free market to compete and sell our goods. And so the example of how competition helps the poor, did I tell you the egg story? Okay, there was a church in Atlanta who said they were going to do a great thing. And they said, we're going to help a community in Rwanda after the genocide. And so they began to send eggs over to this community. Now, of course, that's a good intention. That's following the gospel to take care of those in need. And so what happened is, what they didn't know is that there was a man in that company, in that community. His name was Jono, who had purchased some hens and was beginning an egg business, and he was selling eggs. Well, of course, when free eggs come in,
yes,
everybody wants free eggs. They don't want to pay for eggs.
No.
And so what happened is, his business, he went out of business. Sure. Now, a couple of years later, the church said, all right, that's great. We've done our good here. Let's move on to a new community. And when they went on to a new community, there were no eggs. There was no business, right? If you had competition where Jono and other people were both producing eggs and then lowering the price, increasing the quality, there you have not only eggs provided to the community, but you have jobs, you have opportunity, you have community development in the community that's sustainable and long-term. So really, competition, I gave that example of the rice.
Right.
Right? I mean, we think, we need to protect the poor from competition. And when we protect the poor from competition, what we usually end up doing is helping ourselves and distorting their markets.
We could go on for a long time, but we do have to end. But thank you so much for telling me and our viewers about Poverty Cure. And thank you for watching NPO Showcase, a regular feature of GRTV. If your nonprofit wishes to be showcased, you can contact me, Barbara, 459-4788, extension 115. And do stay tuned for the second segment.